family re-enroll back into the Womack family practice. So in essence, my wife was completely cut off from all the medications and all the treatment that she had received for the past 7 years that dealt extensively, because she was also a victim of these exposures that I brought home from the Gulf War, from my equipment and from my personal exposure, as I alluded to earlier, from bodily contact, and that to me is the greatest travesty. I just can't imagine how a nation, not only will they take care of their veterans that have returned from war, but you have innocent family members and loved ones that never put their hand up and swore allegiance to fight and defend the Constitution of the United States, and they get kicked to the curb and nobody cares.
When you get these health effects, you have to prove to the United States Department of Veteran Affairs that you were exposed. And then you have to prove that the health effects that you're seeing were caused by the exposures you have. But it's very difficult to do when the medical records have been destroyed, the personnel files have been missing or destroyed. And when you got senior Department of Defense officials continue to state, well, none of these guys are sick. None of these guys are dead. Why don't you ask Sue Reardon someday about Terry? Why don't you ask Sue Sitten someday about John? Or Frank Zuley? Or Mr. Kiefer? Ask his granddaughter why she'll never enjoy her grandfather. And look at the Iraqi women and children and men. Ask the question yourself. Is winning a battle but contaminate air, water, soil, and food worth the life of your son and daughter? Is it worth the life of the child? Not just those that are alive, but those that are going to be exposed because the contamination remains there for eternity. It's real simple. I was tasked to clean up the uranium munitions by name, by order, during Gulf War I. I was assigned as the Depleted Uranium Project Director. I did the research. I prepared the programs. I wrote the regulations for management. I wrote the procedures for management. And I got sick because I served my nation. And I was discarded. I was abandoned.
Depleted uranium weapons are designed not only to kill the enemy, devastate the civilian population for generations to come, but DU weapons also destroy the environment and damage the economy. In 1996, the United Nations passed a resolution that made DU illegal under international law. In order to protect themselves and continue the illegal usage of depleted uranium, the United States government has co-opted the International Criminal Court, thus protecting certain individuals from war crimes charges. Unbeknownst to most U.S. citizens and unreported in the U.S. media was the International Criminal Tribunal for Afghanistan held at Tokyo, Japan, December 15th of 2002. Those meetings lasted for over a year. The initial complaint presented for the tribunal charges George Bush with 31 counts of war crimes, violations of the Geneva Conventions and other crimes against peace in the war on Afghanistan. In addition to the original 31 war crime charges against George Bush, the judges and tribunal recommended two additional charges. Number one, Bush knowingly used depleted uranium on the battlefield against his own troops. And number two, that it was, in fact, a crime against the environment.
The United States Army, USAMR at Fort Detrick, Maryland, sold and provided the chemical and biological munitions and anthrax spores to Iraq. That's totally confirmed in the Regal Commission report written by James Toot and the subject of a made-for-TV movie called Thanks to a Grateful Nation that starred Ted Danson and Mark Helgenberger.
The United States has a long-standing involvement in the sale of weapons to third world countries. Donald Rumsfeld, a private citizen, met with Saddam Hussein as a political envoy of the Reagan administration on December 20th of 1983. It is a little-known fact that he was also president and CEO of the G.D. Cyril Pharmaceutical Company. According to Howard Teicher, author of Twin Pillars to Desert Storm, he and Rumsfeld traveled to Baghdad on December 17th in order to lay the groundwork for the presumption of full diplomatic relations between the United States and Iraq. Prior to that time, Iraq was on the known list of terrorist countries. Iraq invaded Iran in September of 1980. It is important to note that the ban on the sale of weapons was in force until 1982, when it was lifted with the strong objections from Congress. The U.S. began the transfer of helicopters to Iraq in December of 1982. In 1983, Banco Nazionale del Lavoro of Italy and its branch in Atlanta began to funnel $5 billion in unreported loans to Iraq with the blessing and official approval of the U.S. government. The Reagan administration began secretly allowing Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Egypt to transfer United States weapons, including howitzers, Huey helicopters, and bombs to Iraq. These shipments violated the Arms Export Control Act. From 1985 through 1989, the Department of Commerce licensed 70 biological exports to Iraq, including approximately 21 batches of lethal strains of anthrax, shipments of weapons-grade Clostridium botulinum, and West Nile fever virus. In April of 1988, the Department of Commerce approved the shipment of chemicals used in the manufacture of mustard gas. The U.S., with the approval of the CDC and the Department of Commerce, armed Iraq illegally from 1985 through 1989.
We knew from the fact that Iraq had got chemical and biological weapons from the United States and used them on Iraqi Kurds and on the Iranians, that they didn't have in their possession, they would probably use them. We knew that all the toxic industrial chemicals that we use in the military, when we move the military, go into combat, were going to affect everybody. We knew that all of the other weapon systems we had have a horrible health and environmental effect on the battlefield. That's history. And with all the background all of us had, both within the military and within academia, it was very easy for us to understand and predict what was going to happen. During the period of 1990 and 1991, we made a conscious decision, and this decision was a decision made between General Powell, General Schwarzkopf, General Horner, and Secretary Cheney to blow up Iraq's chemical and biological stockpiles in place. We also decided to blow up their nuclear reactors in place. This is all confirmed in Schwarzkopf's autobiography, It Doesn't Take a Hero, on page 390. For somebody who wants to look, you can go find out for yourself. At that time, we warned everybody that these exposures, downwind exposures, were going to have a disastrous effect on U.S. military personnel, on coalition personnel, on Iraqi personnel, and on the civilians and non-combatants in the region. That warning was ignored.
The average military person had no knowledge that the United States was secretly and illegally continuing to sell weapons of mass destruction to Iraq just prior to Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. It is important to note that these biological materials were not attenuated or weakened and were capable of reproduction, thus illustrating these biological agents were not for research, but for the purpose of weaponization. Not even the military medical personnel tasked with treating the wounded on the battlefield had any training regarding a biological or chemical casualty. According to Senate Report 103-900, by the time of the invasion of Kuwait, Iraq had developed biological weapons. The Regal Report states that Iraq's biological warfare program was the most advanced in the Arab world. There is substantial evidence to suggest that the Iraqi military used the Soviet doctrine of multiple chemicals and multiple biologicals against our troops. This serves to confuse the diagnostic and treatment process and would account for the wide variety of symptoms displayed by Gulf War veterans.
Most of the guys that I served with are either severely disabled or dead due to the fact of their exposure to the different elements that were involved.
Michael is a veteran of Desert Storm and served in the area of special operations. Because of fear of reprisal by the Department of Defense or loss of his veterans' benefits, he has requested that we alter his voice and image.
One memory that sticks very clearly in my mind is the chemical alarms. At least once a day, we'd have a chemical alarm go off. And after a while, we learned to pay attention to them because we were told it was a malfunction. They would try and tell us that either it had blown paint on it, some fumes from something that had been painted nearby had been blown on it, and that set it off, and so on and so forth. And it makes me wonder. They claim that no chemical weapons were used, but I have every reason to believe that now, in retrospect, it's so sad. It's so sad that you trust them so much that when the chemical alarm goes off, and most normal human beings would go, well, I don't care what you say, that chemical alarm goes off, I'm going to take precautions. But you are so indoctrinated in the fact that, oh, well, we're here to look out for you, we're going to take care of you, that when the chemical alarms go off, you just sit there and continue eating or reading or whatever it was you were doing.
On a number of occasions, chemical alarms went off, and we were ordered not to basically respond to them or report them or write down statistics or even study the environment we were in, which is normally what an NBC person would do. Once an alarm goes off, you start putting, testing things around to see if there's anything happening. At the first call of an alarm, we would be told a number of different things, like it was the gasoline setting it off, or it was the oil well fires burning that was setting it off, or it could have been anything other than an actual chemical or biological agent. Surely wasn't. Don't worry about it, soldier. You'll be okay.
We had alarms going off, chemical alarms, and there were several occasions where we had to go into full mop gear in the middle of the night, or especially in the middle of the night. It's unbelievable that we had all this equipment that had been calibrated and sent over there prior to the war, and we had set out monitors in the perimeter and in the area to detect any kind of chemical activity. However, what is of significant and monumental importance is the fact that we had no biological detection capabilities over there whatsoever. And this all relates back to the fact that we destroyed their chemical biological sites and also the bunker complexes